Hi, and welcome to the ViaMonstra Academy office hours. This is where you can ask questions about pretty much anything related to MDT, Intune, ConfigMgr, Azure, PowerShell, Windows in general. We are pretty flexible. My name is Johan Arvidberg, and I will be your host for the next hour here. And that being said, let the questions come in. Right, we are indeed accepting questions either here on the Zoom meeting for those of you that have attended here or through our streams on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We do stream to Twitter as well, but unfortunately, the Twitter platform doesn't support feedback of the chat up to the chat window that I'm watching here on my screen to the left. So all the others, perfectly fine, but Twitter, unfortunately, not. That being said, if I go over to my screen here, on the Academy, we have a home for the office hours. So if you go to the Academy site, scroll down to office hours, this is where you can watch all the previous recordings, but also this is where we gather all the links, etc., that we share throughout these sessions. And the way it looks once you are logged in there, it's basically a date with the recordings, and we post the links, etc., underneath each of the recordings. We have been trying to catch up on that on YouTube as well, but this is sort of the main source for information right now. But that being said, we did a mini course last week, and that was the one on peer-to-peer. So branch cache bits, peer cache, delivery optimization, LEDBAT, and a few other things. That recording is now available, so if you've missed the event, you can simply log in here and see it. All our mini courses are free on the Academy. They're about 2 hours long, but this is a good crash course in pretty much everything related to, whoops, not that one, but this one here. So good stuff there. That was a pretty good Zoom. But all right, any questions at all? I'll be happy to answer. For those of you in the Zoom call, you can use either the Q&A function or you can use the chat function. I try to keep an eye on that one as well. And for those out there on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, simply comment under the stream that is live there, and I'll be happy to answer. All right. I got a request coming in here on the Zoom call. Basically, what about the MMS conference? For those of you who don't know, the Midwest Management Summit was running from May 2nd to May 5, I guess, that week anyway. So this is the conference here that we attended, a good 600-700 of us, and just an amazing conference. There are plans for next year's event already in place, so put that in your calendar, bookmark it. I guess the question was really about, can you please summarize that event in 10 minutes, more or less? But uh, it's going to be hard to summarize the entire event just on the fly like that. But there were a good 100 plus sessions from community members, config manager, MVPs, etc. And for those of you that are active on Twitter, you have seen that this week, and I'm assuming that the next coming week, there are a series of blog posts being released of content that was talked about during the MMS conference. So if you guys are not on Twitter already, well, get on Twitter because that's pretty much where the product team is around, where the config manager and Intune MVPs are around, and the other MVPs out there, as well as the entire community for MDT, Intune, and config manager. So not sure why they decided on ending up on Twitter, but that's where they are and has been for quite some years. So good information to share there. In general, most of the topics on MMS was related to cloud changes, and especially around customizations for cloud. So for example, updates in Intune and reporting of updates in Intune was a big topic that was discussed in quite many sessions. And on that particular topic, for example, our friends over at Endpoint Manager, they have been releasing updates of their compliance catalog, their dashboards, and information around best practices and tips around this. So if you haven't bookmarked this site before, highly, highly recommend to do that. Some good information coming out. Let's see what else. Me and Andrew, we did a bunch of sessions, everything from everything you want to know about Autopilot to ConfigMgr health to a bit of troubleshooting. What else did we present? It was a long week. Let's see here. Demo, MMS. This is a fun. I'm presenting at MMS for a few years, as you can see, but it was around here where the Microsoft event stopped and the Midwest Managed Summit took over. So prior years it was the Microsoft event. Now it's a community event. But we talked about cloud imaging. That was a big one. There were several sessions at MMS regarding to different ways to deploy machines over internet. Um, the most popular ones was probably the hype around Mr. David Segura's OSD Cloud and also the upcoming Azure integration for it. So now have two different ways of running this. If you haven't seen this, again, we have been showcasing this many times here on the office hours. Good stuff there. We also have our other community project, Friends of MDT as we call it, but basically a PowerShell version of MDT that allow you to do imaging over HTTPS using nothing but a bit of PowerShell and an MDT deployment share. You can host that in Azure, in Amazon, on your own servers, doesn't matter, but this is some fun stuff as well to play around with. Uh, I mean, the schedule is probably still available from MMS. I can actually take a look at that, see if that link is up. I have that on another computer. Just keeping an eye on it. Let's see if I can open up that one without being actually logged into it. We'll see. What can possibly go wrong in the live demo? Oh yeah, it's up there. Beautiful. So even if you didn't attend the event, you can see all the different sessions and you can see the people who actually presented at these sessions. And if you start to check out what they have been posting the last week, you'll actually find a bunch of good information coming out from MMS. So look at these people and see what they've been posting, and you'll find some good stuff, even if you didn't have a chance to attend the conference. I will put that link in the chat for you, for those of you that want that one. When I find the chat window, I will post it. Here we go. Schedule. Unfortunately, before you ask, MMS sessions are not recorded, and you have to actually be there to see the content. There is no playback, but other than that, it's an amazing conference, the best one there is, if you want to learn about ConfigMgr and Intune, at least. So let's see, there are some questions coming in on YouTube here. Is app control the only solution for blocking processes in Endpoint Manager? Uh, Pretty much. Config Manager doesn't really have like an uh, app locker type solution like you have through group policies or similar things in Intune. It was never really designed to be a process control mechanism. Um, so I haven't stumbled across anything that integrates nicely with Config Manager uh, to do that. If anyone have seen it or heard about it or used it, by all means, put a comment here in the chat or in any of the live stream chats, and I'll be happy to share that with the rest of the folks. But I haven't used it there at least. There is a question from Mark on LinkedIn. Best practices on migrating 20H2 to 21H2 through enablement packages. So there are some blog posts out there on how to get those packages into Config Manager. See if I can find them real quick for you. It's been a little while since I looked at it, but uh, what's being asked here is basically the pure fact that if you are going from, that was from the course earlier today, don't mind that. If you're going from like older versions of Windows 10 to newer versions of Windows 10, uh, good Lord, I can't even type today. This is why we have the full in-place upgrade. But when you are going from somewhat recent version to very recent version, like you're going from a 21H2 to a going from 21H1 to 21H2, this is where we can use these enablement packages. And the question was basically, how do we get them into Config Manager in a good fashion? So let me find that link for you. Yes, it was Praval who did the original one, I think. Yes, let me share that link with you. So this was the post in question. This one was for 20H2, but it's the same process for 21H2. It's just a different enablement package. So I'll put that link in the chat for you. And there was another one from someone I haven't seen before. So let me see what that was before I share it. Dangerous thing about searching, sometimes you end up in posts that are not really a good post. They are just happen to be scrubbing other posts and put them out there. But this one looks legit. So I'm going to share that one as well. There's also a step-by-step guide on how to use this using enablement packages. So good information, fairly easy to get going. And again, these links will be shared here on the Academy, and eventually we also put them up on the YouTube channel. For those of you who haven't seen it, we recently switched channel, so now we are up on YouTube and the ViaMonstra Online Academy. That is where you will see this live stream. So I'm not going to load the channel right now because it's going to also load the live stream, and we'll have some interesting sound effects here. But that's where it is if you want to check it there. All right, let's see. A question from Alan here on, let's see, on YouTube. My trial from Intune has expired. What do I suggest to purchase to extend my lab? If you are somewhat active in your lab environment and still want to get away a bit cheaply from a financial point of view, I recommend signing up for a Microsoft developer, a Microsoft 365 developer, because that one you can renew over and over again as long as you prove that you are active in that tenant. Otherwise, the normal EMS E5 trial licenses, they do expire after 90 days. What you can do, obviously, is if you can use various tools to export the configuration before it expires, sign up a new one, and import the configuration again. It sounds terrible, but it's actually not that terrible because there are, and I have shown these solutions a few times here on the Academy, but if I open up a PowerShell prompt, navigate here, I don't have the latest version, but this version is recent enough. It's called Intune Management by Mickey Carlson. It's a PowerShell script. Launch it with or without a console. So it's a batch file that calls the PowerShell script, obviously. But what this one does, after being logged in here, is that you will see everything that you have in your environment. So all device configuration profiles, all your setting catalogs, or all that good stuff, all your application configurations. And you can export them out of here and you can import it again. I've been using this in the past before the Intune had the option, for example, of duplicating a catalog. I would go in here and just make a copy of it. Now I can do that in Intune console, but what you'll find is there are some areas in the Intune console, for example, admin templates, where there is no duplicate option. By using this tool, you can do it. So it's not, as I said, it's not terrible. It's fairly easy to get information out of Intune and back into another tenant. Another option is, of course, to convince your manager to actually buy a few licenses. In my demo tenant here that we use for basically all my demos and all the other stuff, I basically have a 5-year license. That I am paying for. I bought in some additional remote help licenses because I wanted to try that one out. And then I also had a full deal, single E5 365 E5, so I can play around with Defender for Endpoint, which is not included in the normal EMS E5 suite here that I have 5 licenses of. So if you can convince your manager to actually pay for a few licenses, that's obviously the best because then you don't have to worry about things being expiring and whatnot. Otherwise, I will say that if you're planning to do long-term labs, the Microsoft 365 developer option is a good one. Otherwise, sign up for multiple EMS E5 trial licenses. They're valid for 250 users, 90 days, and you can get new one when the old one expires if you need them, and import and export configs. So I hope that answered the question somewhat. A follow-up comment there, I would not recommend the EMS E3, I would recommend the EMS E5. There is a fantastically good website. Try to think of the URL, Office Maps something. Aaron, Office Maps. Let's see what I can find here. Here we go. This is by far the best licensing information you will find. So Aaron works for Microsoft, but this is not like the official documentation. But here, for example, you can click the EMS5, you get all the details, and you will see that what you get between an E3 and an E5. For example, you get Azure Premium Tools, so you can play around with this stuff, which is very good, and you get some additional fancy options for conditional access. Haven't seen this one. I'll put that in the chat for you. This is what I love about the community. People are putting in hours and hours and making good information available for everyone. So that is nice. So let's see. There's a question here in the chat, here in the Zoom call. Can I share that Intune Manager URL? Absolutely. When I find it. Close it again. I might have closed it. All right. I'm a friend with Google. MECM Intune Manager. Here we go. So Michael Carlson, or Mickey Carlson, latest version of 3.5, fairly recently updated. But this is the URL. I'll put that in the chat for you. When I find my cursor, I will put it in the chat for you. All right. Here we go. Let's see. There was another question here in the Zoom call. Chunk of questions, actually. The biggest one yet, I think. Two different scenarios basically painted up here. The thing is, there is a site server running on an older version of Windows Server, and the database is on a remote server. And the go-to scenario is to upgrade that to server OS and move the database home to the SQL to the site server for basically performance reasons here. I would do a backup and restore. I know that Microsoft supports to do in place upgrades of server operating systems. I don't like it one bit, even though it's supported. I have been burnt too many times where the upgrade appears to work fantastically well, going from 2012 to 2016 or from 2016 to 2019, just to be bitten so hard 6 months down the road that I couldn't configure something in IS because of an upgrade I did 6 months ago of a server. I very much prefer clean and pristine installations and simply do a backup and restore of your site server onto the new OS. A very good resource on that topic is from Jason Sandys. So he runs the M for the Win site. It used to be ConfigMgr for the Win, but now it's M for the Win. And if you search for recovery, I think he called it the post recovery. Here we go. He walks you through an end-to-end setup of an old site server and a new site server, but using backup and restore to go that route. So fantastic post. There is only one item I disagree on with Jason, and that is that he recommends removing the distribution point role at some point here. If I can find that recommendation. Unless, yeah, here we go. Don't do that. If you do that, it will force you to regenerate the content library, and it will bump up the version by one, and it will force a redistribution of content. I don't like that. It's okay if you have a small lab environment, I don't care, but in larger production environments, rebuilding a content library can take 10 hours. Redistributing it can take weeks. So please be really careful with that. Otherwise, fantastic post. I also have some older guidance on my blog on moving the database home. I probably have done this 50 times by now. See if I can find that post. I have written a lot of things over the years. Here, moving home. So I'll put that link in the chat as well. I hope that answered the question. Avoid in-place upgrades, do a backup or restore, good practice as any, and life is good. Let's see. There's another question coming in on LinkedIn. Basically, a compiled .NET application that calls numerous PowerShell commands through it. Opening and decompilers doesn't show the scripts. Individual who wrote it left the company. How can I see the PS code being run on the machines? Well, for those of you that have access to advanced threat hunting, that gives some option. But PowerShell actually allows you for script logging in the event log. So I believe I have it up in one of my labs at least. Let me double check that. Otherwise, I'll find it for you. Policy. Let's see in this one. All right. So let me just pick a policy here, and I can edit it. I believe it was in Windows Components PowerShell. Otherwise, I might have to Google for it. Yeah, this one here. If you enable this one, you will actually get PowerShell code in the event log when you run this. So not the entire script, but each function in the script when it runs, you can see. So I have used that to troubleshoot things when I really didn't know what was running in the background. So that could be an option. So yeah, I would do that as a start. Let's see. Was a question here in the Zoom call regarding server migration. Basically, a comment regarding high availability features in ConfigMgr. If you want to use that, then you cannot have your database local. You cannot have your content library local. It has to be remote. But what I've found so far in all my testing and work with high availability is that you spend more time troubleshooting that than you ever would gain from actually having it. So I have slowly skipped using it. Why? Because it's so quick to restore a site server. Most config manager environments can be restored within an hour or two. And most organizations won't even notice that it was down those 2 hours. So while I understand the whole high availability thing, I'm not just the biggest fan of the setup and the implementation of it. I prefer to keep things simple because it's easier. So my take on it, that's all. Let's see, what else? Okay, so there was a follow-up regarding app control in Intune. I haven't done much work on that in Intune. I saw something from Maurice this morning regarding reliability, but it's not really app blocker per se. Uh, might be a good one to look at anyway, I think. find that one. Maurice claims he's going to release it on Friday, so one can hope. This was the post from this morning or yesterday morning, maybe it was. Yeah, so they are dropping a application reliability dashboard on Friday. So could be some good info there. I'll put the link in the chat for you so you have it. If anyone happen to be listening and have a great guide or something around using basically Intune with kind of the equivalent of an app locker, feel free to send that link on. I'll be happy to share it. But I don't know one on the top of my head. Might come back later, but not right now at least. Let's see. There's another question on YouTube. We are an MDT only shop, and we use LANDesk / Ivanti for patching, and we are piloting Autopilot and Intune. Should we leverage ConfigMgr or just Intune? That's one of those it depends on answers. If your goal is only to do, say, imaging of devices into an autopilot state, there is no core requirement for having a config manager set up. Config manager is something you use if you want systems management of the device. Buying just config manager for imaging alone, that's kind of wasting money a little bit, I think. Sorry about that. Oh, good lord. But other than that, if you also want to manage devices in addition to deploy them, Config Manager is it's a great platform. All right. My voice is acting up a little bit, but hopefully it will restore to normal soon. But what you can do in MDT already is you can definitely integrate it with autopilot scenarios. So you can deploy over internet directly into Autopilot. You can do the same thing with Config Manager. You can use cloud management gateways, so do bare metal deployment through Config Manager, content coming from the cloud. The OS, the cloud platform I showed you earlier, supports the same. So there are so many options available these days if you want to integrate imaging with autopilots. It more depends on what else you want to do other than just deploy. That will determine whether using Config Manager or just Intune is a good idea. Yeah, that was a bad timing of getting something in my throat. I agree. All right, old school question in the Zoom call here. Let's go old school. Is there a modern solution available to provide the same functionality as the good old package mapping from MDT? To give you some context, in the old version of MDT, or current version, it's pretty old by now, but you can set up a database and a mapping table. I don't have it on this one. I think I have it on. this one here. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a mapping table. And you can use that one to map old versions with new versions so that if you reimage a device that had, say, Adobe Reader version 10, it will be replaced by Adobe version 11 or whatever the latest version is there. And the question is, do you have something like this for modern functionality, like Intune or something like that? I have not seen it. Trying to think of how it could be achieved. The closest thing you would get in Intune these days is to do dependencies of applications or updates of applications. There is no equivalent of a database that you can tap into like this, at least what I have seen. So I don't know. I will require some thought, I think. Nothing that comes to mind right away, at least. There are some stuff to simplify the migration to Intune, though. Ben Whitmore put together a downright amazing tool um, for migrating apps over to Intune. This one here. Yeah. No, thank you. So, a tool to migrate apps over. You can do one app, you can do 100. Pretty cool stuff. So if you haven't seen this one, highly recommend it. Putting that in the chat for you as well. All right. Any other questions? Now I finally have my voice back. While we're waiting for more questions to come in, friendly reminder is that when I find it, Richard Hicks is joining us in a few weeks to do a new version of his Always On VPN course. The price for that one is just right for the community, so highly recommend to attend that one if you have the chance. Richard kind of knows a thing about Always On VPN. In fact, he wrote a 350-page book about it, so that's for a start. Any other questions? I'll be happy to answer. All right, I'm going to give it a few more minutes, otherwise we will take an early day. All right, I don't see any more. Oh, that was one. Uh, what's the best way to push an MSP through ConfigMgr? Uh, I'm assuming that's just a patch file for an existing MSI package. Uh, you could get away with either regular legacy package or an application model app. Can't say I have pushed out an MSP in a long time. Uh, must have been like old version of Office the last time, but pretty sure there are some guidance around it. The samples I found, they were basically just putting it on the command line, MSI exec, the MSI file, and the patch, and install it, and then try to figure out the right detection methods, which can be tricky. You might have to script those, have a PowerShell script as a detection method to get that going, because sometimes the product code doesn't change, etc., depending on what the patch is for. So, something like that. Uh, that was a comment here about a previous admin deploying an older version of the MBAM client to every machine and a SI afterwards. Yeah, that can be challenging for sure. There's a question here in the Zoom call from Rick. Are you aware of any tools that can assist in debugging feature update failures outside of SetupDiag? Not really. That's the only tool I have stumbled across that can parse the SetupDiag log file and setup log file and some of the compat scan log files or compat XML files. Uh, Usually, if you want more beyond that, it is to parse the log files yourself or have a PowerShell script or something uh, to parse them. ConfigMgr these days, when you do service plans, does collect error messages up. Don't think I have any rolling here right now, but uh, in servicing, it does try to trap uh, errors these days that you might have had during your deployments. But other than that, it's reviewing the log files. And it's not just the log files per se, it's also other related stuff. So, for example, if I go to a folder where I have some failed deployments, um, files like this will also give you indication on what's going on. Um, because if you open this one, for example, you will see that in this example, that was two drivers it didn't like, and it didn't like the antivirus software on the machine, for example. Can give you some information. Other than that, it's more about building on what the community have already figured out. Uh, Good friend Gary, who runs GaryTown.com, he has posted collections of sequences, and a lot of these collections contain validation steps that you can put in and use in your environment to prevent failure, or at least catching them before they become a problem. Cleanup scripts, cleanup actions, validation actions. Uh, there is simply just a bunch of good stuff available that you can copy and paste from and use that will reduce the failure rates that you may have from servicing. So good stuff there. I just got a comment back about the PowerShell scripting. It worked, enabling the script block logging. So excellent, good fingers there. Happy it worked. Let's see. Uh, Another question on YouTube. Is there see, is there other options than OSD Cloud to do cloud imaging? Well, I only know of three solutions that supports imaging over HTTPS. Can open up that presentation we did at MMS. I have them listed there. Somewhere. Yeah. So these three here are the only solution I've stumbled across. This is the one I've been working on myself, way too many hours, but it's fun. This one I mentioned from David Segura. Sorry, this one is I will mention from David Segura, and this is the only one that Microsoft supports. So if you have a ConfigMgr 21.6, 2010 or later, which you should have because they are kind of out of support now, it supports bare metal imaging. So you have to pay for it because it's part of the Cloud Management Gateway, but you can do bare metal deployment without having access to an on-premise infrastructure. So these are the solutions I know about. If anyone has seen anything else, by all means, please post a link in the chat and I will share it. But I usually stumble across them as they show up in the community. All right. Other questions? We have a whopping 12 minutes to our disposal and a fully functional voice at the moment, so that's good. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. Checking the Q&A, checking the chat, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today, and thank you for the many good questions. And I'll see you guys hopefully next Wednesday. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week.